At the edge of the riverbank, a dented tin cup rolled off the fence. A woman said, "Kill me quick!" Boone bent to pick up the cup instead of drawing his gun, and from then on everything tilted. Rain fell into the cup, coins dropped onto the porch, horses vanished in the night. What remained? A straight fence, dark mint, a door that knew when to close. The dented cup lay upside down under the fence like an animal with broken ribs. Its rim scraped a smear of dry, reddish-brown earth, clinging in a jagged line. Wind blew from the river, through thorn grass, pushing the cup in a short roll before it stopped at a knot of rough wood. The sound of metal on dirt was a single, dull tap, small as swallowing spit. A rusted nail jutted from the fence post, its head slightly off-center. The wire groaned whenever the wind pulled it tight. On the fence's edge was a damp patch, not from rain, likely a place the sun rarely reached. Ants crossed the cup's jagged streak, climbed its side, then slid back down from lack of grip. I stood off to the left, hand on the reins of the old horse. Dust clung to its neck in a gray layer. It snorted once, nudging my arm, as if to say it was midday. The smell of rust mixed with dry earth and another faint scent like spent ash. The woman lay a few steps away, bare shoulders, hair matted with sweat and dust. The torn hem of her shirt stuck with dry grass. Her eyes were open but fixed on nothing. Clouded brown irises reflected the fence and a slab of bleached sky. Her wrists were wrapped in wire, not the stiff, barbed kind for cattle, just plain wire, twisted twice and pulled tight. The skin split along the twist, dark like dried sap. Her hand was swollen, knuckles lost, nails packed with black dirt like stove ash. She turned her face toward the fence, lips parting, cracked into white fissures. The words came out light and flat, like someone speaking in a half-sleep. "Kill me quick." No emphasis, no breath behind it. The sentence drifted out and sank into the thorn grass right before her. The wind stopped, the wire on the fence stilled. My horse flicked its ears and stood quiet. From far off came the sound of crows, 2 calls cut short. Earth cracked faintly under my boot sole as I shifted half a step. Boone stood by his saddle. One hand rested on the leather, thumb set on a crack in the hide. The other hung still at his thigh. Hat pulled low, the brim's shadow cutting across his cheekbone. The stance of a man listening, not yet moving. He stepped away from the saddle, not fast, bent and picked up the tin cup. His fingers touched the dent just deep enough to hold it. He turned it once, slow, in his palm, looking at neither me nor her. The rim glinted faintly where sweat had caught dust. I reached into my side pouch. Boone shifted the cup to his other hand, testing its weight, tilting it slightly. No drop fell. The cup was bone dry. She didn't look at it. Her gaze stayed fixed, somewhere between 2 blades of grass, as if counting. Her back rose shallowly, uneven. A fly buzzed at her tangled hairline, dropped to her neck, then shot off when wind hissed through the fence. Boone knelt on one knee. He didn't touch her. He set the cup in the grass, mouth down, 2 handspans from her bound wrist. His knee pressed the earth down a little. Silence. Only the wet creak of saddle leather when his horse shifted its weight. I looked at the wire. The twist sat under her wrist right at the bone. The cut end bent into a hook. With pliers, it could be snapped back easy. We had none. I felt my inside pocket. Only a thin knife, the first half of the blade dulled. Boone held up his palm, signaling to wait. From his leather pouch, he took another knife, short and thick, dark wood handle. The blade opened halfway, stopped, then folded shut again. He slid it back where it came from. Didn't cut. He looked at the twist again, then nudged the cup a little closer, like setting a marker. She blinked for the first time, looked down, not at the cup, but at the patch of earth between her wrist and the thorn grass. I saw her lips tremble like someone touching cold water. Boone stripped off his left glove, tugged by his teeth. Set it on the fence post, tucking the edge under the rusted nail so it wouldn't fall. I opened the canteen. The cap's thread gave a faint scrape, like a mouse chewing. I poured a little over the back of my hand. The water beaded, slid away, left a cool trail. I lowered the canteen to my knee. Boone's chin tipped, barely. I understood. I didn't hand her the water directly. He turned the cup over. Its rim was nicked at one side, leaving a small notch. If filled too much, water would spill through it. He angled the cup on a flat bit of earth, holding it steady with his thumb. I brought the canteen mouth to the rim, poured a thin stream. Water hit the bottom with a muted thud. 2 drops seeped from the notch, clinging like sweat. Boone slid the cup a handspan closer to her wrist. She didn't move her hand. The swelling made it impossible to close. He didn't press. I stepped back half a pace, my shadow pulling off her face. Boone shifted, blocking the sun from her. His brim cut the glare. Her expression eased, just slightly. Her lips parted. The tip of her tongue touched her teeth. No sound. I heard metal in the wind. The fence wire shivered, then stilled. Boone set his thumb in the dent, turned the cup mouth toward her hand. Didn't lift, just turned. A motion small as closed her eyes for a beat, then opened them. Her pupils shifted toward the cup. Lips pressed together, then opened into a narrow line. She didn't ask. She didn't beg. The good hand moved first, slight. Just the forefinger sliding along the ground, pulling a faint trail of dust. Boone didn't touch her. He set both hands on his thighs, fingers straight. I could hear my own heart. The place was that still. I set the canteen cap in the grass by my boot heel so it wouldn't roll. The ground there was hollow enough to hold it. She pulled her bound arm toward the cup, just a little. The wire cut into her skin, leaving a thin, wet line, pale as mist. She stopped, exhaled. Sunlight skimmed her wrist, catching the fine hair there. Boone picked up the glove from the fence post, brushed a fly from her neck. The sweep was light and quick, enough to send it off without making her flinch. I bent down, lifted the cup from the grass, slid it toward her hand, another half span. I moved slow, keeping the rim from touching her wrist. The water inside trembled in a thin ring, then closed. She turned her face, set her lips to the chipped edge, right at the notch. A drop spilled, falling to the dirt between 2 blades of grass. She drank very little, just wet her lips, tilted her head back, eyes looking past Boone's shoulder as if into the shadow beneath his brim. Her face was flat, like water in a basin yet to be touched. I heard a dry swallow, then silence. "Kill me quick," she said it again, but softer. The word quick fell short midway, unfinished, not a demand, just the mouth habit of someone who said a phrase many times. Boone set the cup back in the grass, mouth down. He stood, the motion slow, without strain. He pulled his left glove on, tightened it at the wrist. I looked at his boots, dry mud flaking at the sole's edge in thin scales. I turned my head to look around. Old hoofprints at the trail's edge had crumbled, no fresh ones. A drag mark stretched, as if someone had pulled a sack through the grass, stopping where she lay. It vanished under the fence's shadow. I didn't follow it, just fixed it in mind, like noting a missing fence post. Boone lifted a hand, nudged the brim of his hat back, letting the shadow on his face slide off hers. Light fell in the corner of her eye, softer now with clouds moving past. He bent slightly, not quite looking, didn't react, only swatted a fly with its frayed tail. Boone touched the cup's dent again, as if checking an old crack in his own frame. He let go, left it face down in the grass. No one spoke of the water. No one spoke of the wire. Wind came back, lifted a loose strand of her hair so it brushed the cup's rim before falling. She closed her eyes for another short beat. Her good hand clenched a small clump of dirt, crushed it, then let go. It broke apart, dust speckling her fingers in black dots. She didn't look at them. She turned her face into the fence by half an inch, maybe to block the light. I glanced at the sun, no watch, only measured by the fence post's shadow, now shorter by a knuckle and holding there. Time here moved like rust on iron, drawn out without hurry, granting no one more. Boone shifted his feet. Hard ground crunched under his soles. He tightened the saddle cinch, checked the fourth hole in the leather, its edge starting to fray, then let go. He looked toward the far timber house, a blur behind a strip of dust, then down to the dirt at his toes. No new tracks. The tin cup stayed still in the grass, mouth down. The chipped edge faced her. The notch brightened briefly, then dimmed as clouds covered the sun. She exhaled again, a faint hiss, like water through teeth. I heard it clear because nothing here muffled sound. Only the fence, the thorn grass, the dented cup, and three people yet to decide what must be done. Boone didn't say, "Don't be afraid." He didn't say, "It's over." He just stood 3 steps from her, arms straight, his frame blocking part of the wind. I held the reins loose, letting my horse shift as it pleased. We stood long enough for the shadow of clouds to move across the small field beyond the dry gully. When the wind rose again, the fence wire creaked like something braced to push. No one pushed. The cup didn't roll. I looked at Boone. He gave the smallest nod, a tilt only someone close would see. Not yes, not no. Just the note that someone was breathing here, and a dented cup lay face down here. That was fact. She looked at me briefly, then passed me to Boone. Her gaze brushed the frayed collar of his shirt, stopped at the button replaced with a knot of rope. She didn't ask his name, didn't ask where, didn't repeat her last words. The wind shifted, carrying the far, thin smell of river water. Beside, one hand on the reins, the other under her elbow to keep her from stumbling. She was light, but not the lightness of health. Light, like a sack with nothing left inside. The house was low, tin roof dulled, porch boards sunken in the middle from years of feet. The door opened with a short squeal, the smell of old dust and cold ash. On the table in the center was a faded ring where a pot once sat. Boone went straight in without looking around. He set the tin cup on the table. Metal struck wood with a dull knock, then stillness. Its rim left a pale red circle, dry at the edge, darker along the chipped groove. The red spread faintly, as if from a wet hand's touch. Boone pulled a chair close to the table for her. She didn't sit. She stood a while, eyes moving over the objects as if counting. The black skillet on a nail, a coiled rope, a coat slung over a chair back, the lamp without a chimney. Then she stepped toward the window corner. The curtain there was old, brown, frayed at the edge, a single dust mote drifting in the light, hanging longer than it should. She let herself sink to the floor, back to the wall, knees drawn up tight. Looked at no one. Boone picked up the folded blanket near the stove. It was thick, heavy, its edge worn to fuzz. He shook it once to drop the dust, kept it low so as not to startle her, then spread it under the window frame, leaving a gap so her feet could rest on the wood without touching the wall. She looked, said nothing, slid down onto the blanket. Her face turned to the wall, bare shoulder under tangled hair, freckles scattered like flecks of dried silt. I fetched water. The wooden barrel sat on the porch, beside the long trough, half full, its surface quivering as wind threaded through. I dipped with a chipped wooden ladle. The water poured into the cup with a heavy sound, touched bottom, then stilled. I set the cup on the table, the dull red stain on its rim standing out beside the clear ring of water. Boone stepped aside, angling his body to block some of the light from the corner where she lay. She did not reach for it, her eyes fixed on a crack in the wall where a spider had spun a fine thread. We did not speak of the bed. It stood beside the stove, mattress sunken, sheet faded. Boone spread another blanket over it, the way one covers something not to be touched again for a while. He lit the stove with the bundle of wood already tied. The fire caught, making a small crackle. Heat rose slowly, not too hot, just enough to draw the damp from the blanket. She shifted, pulling the edge of her own blanket up to her neck. I set the kettle on. The spout's enamel was chipped, the handle loose, when the water window pane, and died. She exhaled, a short breath, thin as mist. Boone poured a little warm water into another cup, not the dented one, dropped in a dry tea bag, lifted it out after a silent count, set the cup on the table's edge out of her reach, did not hand it, did not press. When he turned away, her hand moved slightly under the blanket, as if confirming something was there, something with a smell other than wood and cold ash. She did not touch it, only knew. That was enough. Night came. Wind moved along the river, carrying the scent of reeds and settled mud. Boone put the lamp out early. We sat in the dark a while. His horse shifted under the tree outside, mane brushing the bark with a soft scrape. From the shadows, I heard her breathing, long, short, long, then a pause. The room held no other sound, enough that I counted 3 times the wind struck the tin roof. Morning light slid between 2 gaps in the boards. She was still under the window, chin resting on her arm, eyes open. I stepped softly to the stove, did not reheat water, just placed a piece of hard bread on a plate, set it on the table beside the cup. A fly landed, walked 2 circles, flew away. I noticed the dusty print of her fingers on the blanket's edge from the night before. The thumb pressed harder than the other 4, the mark longer, as if testing whether the fabric would tear further. The second day passed level, marked by the sound of a saw pulling through wood at the barn. Boone fixed the door bar, replaced the tie rope, said nothing of why. She rose once, walking from the window to the sink, her right hand holding the blanket across her chest, her left braced on the table's edge. She looked at no one. Each step sounded plain, the dry skin of her heel rasping the floor in a faint scrape. She dipped water from the cup on the table, not the dented one, took a short sip, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, set the cup back exactly where it had been. Its handle turned toward the door, as if she had placed it that way before. That evening the kettle boiled again. I moved it aside before the lid began to rattle. The steam only hissed softly. She did not startle, only glanced over, then away. I pulled the curtain, keeping moonlight from falling on her face. Boone adjusted the doormat, turning the cleaner side up. Small tasks, done without words. By the third afternoon, a horse whinnied short outside. Wind swept dust across the porch. I stepped out, holding the door to keep the hinge from squealing. A man on horseback stopped at the gate, did not dismount. His coat hung loose, collar up. His gun belt shone hard in the sun, flashing like a small mirror on the brown blanket. His mouth pulled to one side, not quite a smile. He said 4 words, voice flat, no need for volume, "She's mine." No one stepped forward, no one asked. He waited, the sure weight of someone certain every door opens in the end. I looked at his boots. The toes rubbed together lightly, dropping dust in tiny grains that vanished on touching ground. On his trousers, salt stains from horse sweat spread in a fan. Boone did not answer. He turned halfway, stepped inside, walked past the table, eyes fixed on the doorway. His hand brushed the dented tin cup. His thumb pressed the notch for a beat, then let go. He stopped in the middle of the room, his body blocking part of the window frame. She stayed still under the blanket. Only her eyes, from the wall's shadow, looked across Boone's shoulder into the strip of light outside. The man on the horse laughed once in his nose, as at a stubborn child. He reached to the leather bag behind his saddle, pulled out a cloth sack. Heavy. When he dropped it on the porch step, metal struck metal, weighty and blunt. The saddle fringe shook, releasing a few more motes of dust. The smell of copper mixed with tanned leather rose sharp, like old blood. He said, "Enough to buy the whole town." The sack stayed still. Its mouth was tied with a thin rope. A simple knot, one pull to open. I saw a small hole at the bottom, roughly stitched with coarse thread. The sewing uneven, not done by a tradesman. 2 coins inside knocked together with a short tang as wind shook the porch. The sound was brief, like a fingernail on a tabletop. Boone did not look at the sack. He looked past my shoulder to the grass, then to the cup. He reached out, pushed the tin cup toward her. Not hard, not slow. Enough for it to slide a short way over the wood, leaving a fine dust trail. Its mouth turned toward the wall. The notch aimed exactly at where she lay. The cup stopped at the table's edge with a faint knock. The man at the gate narrowed his eyes. Whether he understood the gesture or pretended not to, I couldn't tell. His hand moved near the gun grip, then away again, like scratching. "Enough," he said again, softer, looking at Boone. Boone did not answer. He did not look at him. His gaze stayed on the space between cup and wall, where light fell in a white strip on the wood. From beneath the window she brought her good hand from the blanket. It shook, but not hidden. Her forefinger moved slowly across the floor, touching the dust line left by the cup. It left a thin, clean track, hair fine. She stopped at the edge of saw Boone's hand loosen, knuckles easing. He leaned slightly, so the strip of light no longer reached her eyes. The tin cup sat still, mouth dark, waiting. In the room there was the scent of dried mint from somewhere, likely from a bunch hung on the rafter, a thing I hadn't noticed until now. It was clean but cold. The man at the gate cleared his throat, the sound dry as stone rolling. He lifted the sack 2 inches, dropped it, letting the coins speak louder. No one flinched. He tipped his head back, gave a short laugh, patted his horse's neck. Sunlight struck his cheekbone in a bare slab. He said, "I don't wait long." The words fell to the porch like a rusted nail onto the floor, hitting wood, then staying. Boone drew a chair to the table, sat back straight, hands on the surface, spaced exactly the width of the cup. He breathed out through his nose, faint. She, under the window, pulled her hand back, tucked it under her chin, her eyes fixed on the cup, not for thirst, because it sat between two banks, one with the sound of metal, one with the shadow blocking wind. I stood in the doorway, hand on the panel. The hinge made no sound. Dust thickened on my fingers, unnoticed. Outside, a bird cut sunlight into threads. Inside, the sack's coins were silent now. Only the steady river far off, and 3 mismatched breaths in the room. "She's mine," the man said again, this time softer, as one certain. Boone didn't answer. The cup didn't move. Its mouth faced the wall. The notch turned exactly toward her shadow. The act had said what needed saying. Here, the answer lay on the table, not on the porch, not in the hand of the one who came. And we left it there, letting the wind pass again without carrying off a single word. The rain's night passed like an old ox, heavy steps, then stillness. Morning slid into the house in 2 thin stripes through the plank gaps. The smell of wet earth still fresh, mixed with the scent of wood swelling as it drank. On the table, the dented tin cup sat mouth up. The chip on its rim held a single large drop, swollen, about to fall. From the roof, water fell in sparse beads. The last bead landed just as the cup's surface lifted into a round ripple, hung there a beat, then broke. The cup was full. Boone opened the door. The wet hinge gave a short cry. He went straight to the fence. The earth by the post was darker than the rest. A fresh hoofprint measured. Each time he stopped, he touched the boot toe to a print's edge, gauging depth by sight, then moved on, said nothing. Inside, the woman sat upright beneath the window, blanket to her neck. Her face angled, eyes following Boone's shadow through the curtain slit. The cup on the table brimmed, the surface tight, unspilled. On that surface lay the reflection of a rusted strip of roof tin and a long white shard of sky. She stared into it unblinking. Her good hand slipped from the blanket, touched the table edge. Her fingertip met a speckled, damp patch. She stopped. Boone stooped for something small near the post. A scrap of black leather, edge torn, stitched in haste with white thread. He rolled it once between thumb and forefinger, pocketed it, button closed, then shifted the rifle to the other shoulder and went on. Dry mud clung to his boot edge, not yet shaken off. The wind pressed through the grassland, carrying the smell of horse and rain-washed iron. Inside, the next drop did not fall. Silence. Only her breathing, short, then long, then short again. She leaned slightly, hand toward the cup. Her finger touched the chip. A catch. She drew back at once, as if a cold edge had cut the center of her chest. Her eyes stayed on the seam where water met the jagged rim. She did not drink. She did not push it away. She kept a distance shaped like a crack. I went to the table, didn't touch the cup, turned the chair so its legs wouldn't scrape the damp floor. She glanced down, slow. A tangle of hair clung to her cheek, heavy from the night's rain. She adjusted the blanket, lowered it an inch, enough for her collarbone to show, then pulled it back, as if testing the thickness of the air. Boone had reached the dry gully, where the fence bent around a low cactus clump. He stopped, half hidden in its shadow, ran a hand over a short length of cord, one end soaked from rain, the other dry and frayed. The dry end held a strand of chestnut horsehair. He pulled it free, rolled it small, pocketed it with the leather scrap, his face unchanged. When he returned toward the smell of wet earth drew back to the porch. All day Boone walked the fence line, returned, went again, like a rusted needle tracing a map it knew by hand. No one called him, no one asked him to stay. She kept looking at the cup as one might at a temporary well inside a room. The water no longer brimmed. A few specks of dust floated on it, settled like unread words. Evening fell. The sky shrank to a flat basin of metal. Rain came in one short sweep, then stopped. The cup still brimmed to its rim. She had not touched it. Boone walked the fence again, his shadow cutting through wet grass into the darker marks of standing water. When the last light left the wire, the field sank into a silence thick as coarse cloth. I felt my heartbeat give one uneven knock, then nothing. Night came without warning from crows or wind. Just darkness gathering fast, as if someone pulled a heavy curtain. I built a small fire, enough to dry the damp from my shirt. The woman lay on her side, face to the wall. Her good hand outside the blanket, the knuckles dry and rough as bark. The door struck open with a single thud. Boone came in, coat muddy from shoulder to hem. Mud dried on his arm, fresh along his side. The smell of marsh and trampled reed entered before he did. Hat brim wet, its edge heavy. He set the rifle where it belonged, not leaned for risk of slipping. Pulled off his gloves, tossed them to a chair. One finger turned out like another's hand. On the table, the cup was still, water flat. Boone didn't look at me. He went straight to the open door. On its inside hung an old hinge nail, slightly bent, driven deep. He lifted the cup. The water rippled once, then settled. He hung the cup on the nail, mouth outward to the porch. It caught a little on the door's edge, then seated. The water tilted, gathered to one side. The first drop fell to the threshold, small as a needle tip hitting wood. The second, then the third. The threshold darkened into a curved stain, following a crack in the grain. I looked at Boone's boot edges, mud in clumps, some splitting and falling to the floor, crumbling into dark piles, A fray at his coat's hem held a small thorn fragment. He plucked it, crushed it in his palm, and pushed it under the stove's base like any scrap in a dream. I went to pick up the glove from the chair, set it back neatly. At its edge was a smear of young chocolate-colored mud. I folded it, placed it beside the rifle, careful not to let my fingers touch the stock. Boone bent, swept the back of his hand across the wet mark on the threshold. Not to wipe it clean, just to spread it wider. The water sank into the wood's grain. It felt like he was measuring something that needed no name. Then he sat at the bed's edge, facing the door. The fire in the stove flared once, then dropped. She pulled the blanket higher. I heard the wall hook give a faint knock as the wind shifted. The night lengthened that way. Small acts, repeated, unexplained. The cup still hung. Water still fell. At times it seemed the drops might stop, then they fell again. I dozed in the chair, opening my eyes to find Boone still sitting, back straight, eyes not fully closed, like a man keeping watch over something you didn't need eyes to see. Morning came up the color of ash. The sun, somewhere behind a thick cloud, not showing, only making things less black. I opened the door early, hand-brushing the hanging cup to check for snags. Dry. Inside it, only a pale ring running the rim, like dried salt. The last drop had fallen long before. The threshold left with a darkened crescent nearly dry, its edge cracked. Out in the yard, where yesterday evening's hoof prints were, the ground had smoothed over. Some patches were lightly chopped, not the shape of pressed hoof, but the marks of someone driving an animal off. Lines flaring, broken, shallow and deep. On the post's tie rope a new knot. New rope. The old lay coiled nearby, its frayed end neatly cut. The man's horse was gone. The barn stayed shut. Boone's saddle hung on its familiar nail, the smell of last night's dried sweat sharp in the air. Inside, the door was bolted. The latch sunk into its keep. No more squeak with the wind. The curtain hung lower than usual, by a notch. She sat on the blanket, back to the wall, eyes still on the place where the cup hung. Her good hand rested on her knee, thumb rubbing a small patch of dried mud from the night before. The mark faded, then vanished. She did not look at me. She did not look at Boone. She looked at the dry cup. Boone stood in the doorway, left hand on the jamb, forefinger resting in a crack in the wood, silent. His coat still carried patches of dry mud, its edge more frayed where he often pulled it. I saw on his cuff a black arc, not mud, like the soot of a burnt cord. He brushed it once, not clean, and left it. From the doorway, past the table, he lifted the cup from its nail, turned it once in his hand. Inside was dry white, the thin salt line at the bottom broken in two, no longer a ring. He set the cup on the table, mouth down. This time the sound of metal on wood was round, clean, unhindered by water. He didn't look at her. She didn't look at him. But at the corner of her eye, a small muscle near the temple eased, like ground. After night rain, then sun, closing over. I sat in the chair, looking at the fence line through the partly closed door. No one at the gate. The new tie rope pulled taut, its knot lying sideways like a mouth that would not open. A bird perched on the fence, cocked its head, hopped twice, then flew. Inside, the cup sat still, mouth down. and the door held the room smaller, enough to keep silence inside without spilling it. We didn't say, "It's done." We didn't say, "It's not." Only a new space opened, the size of an emptied cup. Boone began at the most hidden corner of the fence, where a post had leaned since the dry season. The morning was as dull as cooled ash. He carried a hammer, a fistful of long nails, a few rough boards with torn saw marks. The earth at the post's base was wet, deep. Each hammer blow brought a flash of water in the cracks, then gone. The smell of pine sap mixed with mud. He wore no gloves. His palms held sawdust, held the sweat loosened by rain still clinging to the post tops. I stood on the porch, watching each new board fitted into the gap between two aged posts. Boone measured by sight, tapped the back of the hammer, listening for solid or hollow before deciding. He stripped off the old wire, coiled it neatly, dropped it near the stone step. When he drove a nail, he gripped it low, kept it straight, 3 strokes, and it was buried. The nail's head shone, the wood's edge cracked a thin line, like a fine knife cut. A window stood ajar. Inside, the woman had pulled her chair near the table, her wrist still wrapped in coarse bandage. She held the dented tin cup. Her thumb traced the chipped rim like walking the edge of an old sandbar. She poured the water into the wash basin. It fell in a thin ribbon, a speck of dust spinning at its end, circling, then disappearing through the wooden drain. She used no cloth. Her palms scrubbed bare. She hung it back on the bent nail by the doorframe, its head rounded from years of use. The cup caught, dropped half an inch, then held. She let go, stood a long beat looking at the place. No nod, no deep breath. Just stood until the cup's shadow aligned with a crack in the wood. Boone replaced the rusted nail at the last post. With a small pair of pliers he bent it, one sharp snap, and the head popped free into the grass. He didn't look for it. He drove the new nail, its bright face standing in the sunburnt wood. He straightened, brushed the dust from his trousers. It fell in clumps, clung to his boots like dried salt. He glanced once toward the house, then turned away, set the hammer carefully on the porch step, handle in. The wind shifted, bringing the scent of mint from the kitchen beam. She, inside, didn't reach for it. She passed the hanging cup in a slow step, her hand gliding past, as if measuring the space between skin and metal. The cup didn't touch her. The two stayed apart by a thin air's width, enough to know each other was there. I watched, didn't call. Boone outside didn't call. The day went that way, he mending fence, she cleaning cup, no one saying why, no one asking if it was done. Market day, earlier than usual. Clouds pushed by wind opened a patch of light, like an unfinished brush of lime. Boone heaved the saddle onto the horse's back, cinched the girth at the third hole, checked the bit latch with his finger, tapped it lightly, listening for the sharp ring. He didn't say, "Market." He just pulled on his coat, set the old hat on his head, and led the horse through the gate with the new latch. Fresh-set posts stood straight in a line, their short shadows falling over wet grass. The market sat along a packed dirt road, flattened by wheel ruts. People laid their goods on canvas, pliers, rope, nails, short-bladed knives, coarse fiber scarves, bright tin cups and bowls. Boone stopped at a kitchen stall, A new cup hung from a cord hook, body unmarked, rim perfectly round, no chip. The sun struck it so hard you had to squint. The stall woman said nothing. She unhooked the cup, set it on the table, tapped it once to test the thickness. The ring was clean. Boone laid a few coins down, no bargaining. She wrapped the cup in paper, tied it with a small, neat knot. Boone held the bundle in his hand, didn't open it to check. He gave a small nod, turned his horse, and headed out of the market. The bit clicked evenly in the horse's mouth. On the way back, the cup's bundle stayed silent, the white paper dulling to gray with dust. Mouth of someone keeping still. She didn't touch the bundle. She passed by, eyes pausing for half a beat, then moving on. No dust beneath the bundle. Dust only clung to the shelf around it. Boone didn't finish the water. He set the cup on the table, mouth toward the wall. Wind on the porch brushed the paper wrap, made it puff once, then settle. The turn was there. The new waiting, the old in use. No drum, no explanation. Only the taste on the tongue shifted slightly, because the chip caught a thin run of water. The afternoon drifted past like thin smoke. On the shelf, the bundle's knot stayed tight, unshifted. On the table, the dented cup still held watermarks. She looked at the two without crossing between them. In her eyes, maybe, the distance was exactly one step. She didn't take it. Next morning, the ground dried fast. Wind blew across, sweeping dust into threads. She swept the yard every morning. The broom handle was a straight branch, rough, its head tied with old straw. Each pull sent up a thin haze that settled on her hem in a faint line. She swept from porch to gate, from gate back in, no more, no less. The fine sand gathered into a small pile. She scooped it with a tin spade, poured it into the pit by the ditch. Each time she passed the door, her fingers brushed the hanging cup. Not a direct touch, more like checking if a lamp was still warm. Afterward, her back seemed straighter, her sweeps more even. On windy days, when the cup trembled, she stopped and waited for it to go still before moving on. No one noticed. I didn't say. Boone didn't look out. Only the broom's rasp and the cup's faint tap on the nail like a small word unspelled. In the yard's corner, a new empty patch showed where a sack used to lie. She put the dust pile there. It was flat, its edge sharp, like a small map drawn in dirt. Wind reshaped it in half an hour, then erased it. She cut another sweep line. The sweep lines arranged like threads laid on cloth. Boone carried the leftover wood into the shed. He stacked it by grain, by length, ends facing the same way. He locked the shed with a new clasp, the latch snapped tight. She passed by without testing it, broom in hand, brushing over his tracks without touching his boot tips. The sun rose hard for a beat, then softened. She hung the broom on a straight nail under the porch, not bent like the one holding the cup. The broom shadow linked to the cup shadow curve. The scent broke only a little. You had to be close to catch it. I stood at the door, the cold thread of it touching my nose. She stepped back once, looked at the cup a moment more, then went to sweep the yard, as always. The broom lines stayed even. A short wind made the mint leaves shiver once, then lie still. Next day, the sprig was still there. No one took it to brew, no one crushed it for the smell on the hand. The cup stayed empty. The mint stayed as given. Boone passed the table, eyes sliding over it, hands untouched. He lifted the water bottle, poured into another mug, drank twice, set it down, mouth to the wall. The tin cup stayed dry. The wrapped new cup on the shelf dulled another half shade under dust, its string still tight. River wind carried the sound of grass striking dust from itself. The wall crack lengthened by a finger's width, enough for an ant to pass. She set her fingertip on the table's edge, drew a straight line in the dust, stopped at the cup's base. The mint didn't fall, didn't lean. Only a single flake broke loose, clung to the side, then slid to the bottom. By afternoon, a shaft of sun slipped through the tin's gap, lit the mint for a few minutes, like a thin-boned fish surfacing before cloud closed over. She stood on the porch, watching from the corner of her eye. Boone was at the barn, tying the hitch, the knot firm. He didn't call, "Come see." No one called to anyone. Noon, shadows short. Boone sat on the porch, the wooden chair giving one creak, then holding still. He held the tin cup, turning it in his hands like something that once blistered his palms, but now was only habit. Each turn sent the chipped edge across his thumb, leaving a thin, cold line. He stopped at that point of contact, held it a beat, kept turning. His eyes were on the river, a dim strip of silver light beyond the reeds, the surface unseen, only the paler air above it. In the kitchen she stood, her shadow falling sharp and rectangular on the floor, cutting through the old watermark in the wood. Her hip leaned lightly against the table edge, her good hand on a dry cloth, squeezing its fold, letting go. She washed nothing, cooked nothing, only stood. On the cold stove the black skillet lay face down, its handle pointing out as a reminder no one read. Boone slowed the cup's turning. Inside, no water, the mint sprigs still there. With each turn, sunlight hit the tin, flared into my eyes, and went dark again as the cup rolled past shadow. Boone didn't squint. He only angled his jaw so the light wouldn't strike the pupil head-on. Dust from the yard still clung to his knee. I could see the morning's broom lines on the porch boards running. Heard that touch, as soft as a breath let out. He set the cup on his knee, mouth up, still looking at the reeds. I didn't ask what he saw. I knew it was only water, without a face. In the kitchen, she shifted her weight from left foot to right. The hem of her dress brushed the cabinet edge with the sound of dry silk. She lifted her gaze, not through the window, but through the space between two porch posts. Her eyes didn't reach the river. They stopped at the cup on Boone's knee, then fell to the floor like a leaf loosed from its stem. Boone lifted the cup from his knee, set it on the porch step, stopped, turning it. The mouth faced the house, the mint leaning toward the shaded side. With a fingertip, he nudged it closer to the post so it wouldn't roll if the wind rose. Then he leaned back against the wall, hands at his sides, fingers touching the wood to feel the house's cool soak into skin. I stood between them, a space no longer than the cup itself. No one asked anything of anyone. I heard the river's tone thicken, the wings of a bird folding into the reeds, the silence filling the house the way it always did. Not fast, not slow, not asking leave. The cup sat there, the mint lay still. Boone watched the river. She stood in the kitchen. No word belonged between them. Flood season. The river changed color overnight, murky as ground wood mixed with soil. It ate into the bank, stripping inches of new grass. Reeds leaned into the current, their soaked tips lifting back slow, as if remembering where they stood. Stones at the edge wore new brown lines, one finger above the old. The porch boards had swelled halfway. A nail scraped soft under my thumb. Inside, the cup still hung on the door's nail. The nail head was polished bright from years of lifting and setting. The mint in the cup had darkened, green gone to brown, veins showing deep as hidden lines under skin. The leaf hadn't fallen. The dry stem still planted in the tin's curve, its tip at the rim, keeping the same angle each time the wind brushed by. Boone reset the gate latch. The new tie from the other day had shrunk in the damp. He drew it out 2 inches and retied it. The clasp clicked short. He stood, looking at the fence, eyes stopping at each nailhead, fingers tapping the wood as if counting. After rain, the mud on his heels cracked into plates, falling away to the old, rough leather. I swept the piece where it belongs. The new cup Boone had bought still sat on the shelf, its paper wrap creased from damp. The string was still tight. On top, a dry thumbprint of mud had paused and left. Boone hadn't opened it. I hadn't. It stood there like an object that knew how to wait. Below, a spider had run a fine thread from the corner up, not snagging the paper. The river rose higher. I measured by sight. Half the 3rd stone step gone under. 2 wooden barrels tilted at the porch edge to catch rain were now dark and full, holding a few insect husks. Now and then, the dipper knocked against the rim. Each time the wind turned, the cup swayed once, the mint shivered, the tin touching wood with a single ting, swallowed by quiet. Dusk came earlier. The cup's shadow stretched on the wall, its rim shadow touching the old crack exactly, like a wound healed along its line. She walked through it, splitting it, letting it join again. Boone carried in an armful of wood, laid the ends even so they clicked together. He set the cup down, then hung it back, measuring its distance from the frame by habit. No slip. The cup stayed. The mint stayed dark. Time here counted itself in such things. Night deepened, the river louder, like the breath of something large you could not see. Wind under the eaves touched the cup to a muted note. I lay back in the chair, listening and counting. 3 river breaths, 1 small ting, then nothing. She pulled the blanket to her neck, face turned toward the cup, as if toward a lamp gone out but still remembered for its brightness. Boone didn't wish her good night. He only turned his chair toward the door, back straight, palms on his thighs, now and then tapping the wood to the river's slow pulse. I passed the porch. The sky was ash-gray. Wind not strong but steady, sawing along the fence like a dull blade. Mud marks on the steps had faded. The 2 rain barrels leaned toward each other, rims close enough for the last drop from one to fall into the other without loss. The cup still hung straight. When wind came through the door, its body turned a quarter round, then settled back, like the habit of an old watchman needing only a glance. The wind shook the cup. A thin metal sound rose, faint as a far-off horseshoe. Not the sound of galloping, only the even tap of iron on broken ground, at a distance far enough no dust could be seen. My ear held the sound, kept it a beat, then let it go, so it passed the porch, the reed window frame. curtain lifted half a notch. Her eyes didn't stay on anything longer than needed. They skimmed the cup, Boone's shadow, the glint of water past the bank. I caught a fine mark at her mouth's edge. Trace of a habit long dropped, back for one beat, then gone. She reached out, straightened the kitchen cloth to line with the table's edge, let her hand fall, touched the cold air, drew back. On the shelf, the wrapped new cup leaned by a hair from the wind, the string still tight. I set it straight, didn't open it. The paper gave a dry crack. In that sound, the hanging cup quivered once more. I stepped back, feeling my heart beat in the space between the two notes, thinking of a dirt road somewhere, of the map of hoofprints long gone, then letting it go. Outside, the sky pushed one slice of sun through thick cloud, lighting the river's skin for a short span, then shutting. The cup took a narrow streak of light along its dent, lost it at the chip. The mint, dark as ink, drank it with the part of itself no longer alive, and gave back only a dry brown. I saw the silence here was not empty. It was thick as river mud, holding each sound so it would not drift away. I set my hand to the porch post. Wood warm where the sun touched, cold in the shadow. Boone rose, wordless, took 2 steps to the barn door, checked the latch once, the same old click. Back inside, he lifted the cup half an inch from its nail, hung it back in place, only to be sure the measure still held. The wind shook it. This time, the note was thinner, like someone touching the rim of an empty glass with a fingernail, then stopping mid-ring. The sound made one round of the house, touching nothing. It passed her, past me, past Boone, and thinned into the far river noise. I knew, if there were horseshoes at all, they were as far as that. No name, no direction, no need to call. The day slid sideways like a shadow, stretching past the door's reach. The wind shifted. The mud smell eased. The reeds no longer swiped their faces in the water. The bank stopped crumbling. The things meant to stand stayed where they were. Cup on nail, mint in cup, new cup wrapped on shelf, gate latch set to its catch, fence straight to the eye. We did small work. I split a block of wood, the axe pausing at a hard grain, bending it until it broke clean. Boone brushed the table, dust sticking to his palm, falling as a faint line when he shook it out on the porch. She washed the dishes, lower step, looking at the river. My back took the porch woods cool. My eyes followed a rotten branch turning in the reeds, rolling a few times, vanishing. I thought nothing of before, nothing of after, only now, mixed with the stillness. Wind, river, the faintest scent of mint, the thin metal note still somewhere, dimming, gone. No one explained. Boone didn't say why the cup stayed hung, why the new one stayed wrapped. She didn't say why the mint stayed, why her hand each morning touched it and drew away. I didn't name what I saw, didn't name their motions. They fit together like wood joints without spare nails, and needed none. The river would stay muddy, then run clear. The cup would hang, then throw another ring of light on the wall. The mint would darken, then crumble into a thin smell lost in dust. Tomorrow the wind might shift and strike the cup to a new note. Or not. We left room for both without waiting. Here the echo was a thing you could hold, tin, dented, chipped, with one dry leaf lying still, and a house that had no more to say. In this place, some things need no name. A dented cup hung dry on a nail. A sprig of mint gone dark, but still. A fence line straighter than a drawn mark. A door that knows when to close. Sometimes healing is not speaking. It is setting the thing in its place, pouring just enough, walking the boundary once, then sitting still. If you have such a thing left in you, a dented cup of your own, a dry leaf, a new latch, write it in one short line below. No explaining, only a detail.